My name is Carla Sumula, and I, along with my colleague Andrew Broderick, direct the SF Tech Council, and we're so pleased that you could be here. And our theme today is assistive and accessible technologies, what's happening in San Francisco. We have 5 panelists, which means we've got a lot to take care of, a lot of business. So Maricela from the San Francisco Public Library, Fiona Hinze from ILRC, that means Independent Living Resource Center, Sean Dougherty from Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired, Tiffany Ghiorso, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but from the Department of Rehabilitation, and Debby Kaplan from the Mayor's Office on Disability. We're going to start out with a few definitions, and I'd like to then ask you to kind of weigh in, folks, either in the chat or raise your hands, and we'll see if we're missing anything. Assistive technology and accessible technology, 2 terms that are thrown around, and sometimes they're used interchangeably, but they are not actually interchangeable, although they do overlap with each other, or can. And what we've realized over the past couple of years is that a lot of folks out there don't know what either of them are or what they might refer to. So assistive technology, and this is a baseline definition, this is where I invite you to jump in. Assistive technology is any item, piece of equipment, software program, or product system that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of persons with disabilities. And so as you're looking at that, you can kind of digest that a little bit. I'm going to jump to some examples. Assistive tech can be all kinds of things. It doesn't have to be high tech. It can be low tech. Pencil holders, braces, walkers, things that have been around for a long, long time. It can be high tech, like the specialized computers or eye gaze and head trackers. It can be other kinds of hardware, prosthetics, mounting systems. It can be computer hardware, so special switches, keyboards. I think it was Paul Goodman who's on the call was just talking the other day about all the different kinds of keyboards that are out there. And for people who aren't familiar with assistive tech, that's an awful lot of them. Pointing devices. It can be computer software, screen readers, and communication programs. And it can also include specialized or inclusive learning materials and curriculum aids. So it's a wide range. I'll move it back to the previous slide. Anybody want to jump in and add or change or correct this definition from our panel? Anything you'd like to add that you don't think is here?
My name is Sean Dougherty, and I'm, as you mentioned, I'm from Lighthouse for the blind and visually impaired in San Francisco. I work as the manager of our corporate relationships within Access Technology. This definition is from ATIA, so I think it's really good. I wouldn't necessarily change it. Just the one thing I always like to point out when talking about assistive technology is just kind of explaining that really all technology by definition is assistive. So of course, here we're talking about specifically forms of technology that help people with disabilities, but I kind of like to frame it in a way of thinking about the usage of any technology for anyone, whether they have a disability or not, and mainstream technology is basically augmenting function and providing assistance in some capacity. So this area of technology is just kind of further reaching that to individuals who have different types of conditions and disabilities.
Great, thank you. Fiona, I saw that your hand was up.
Thank you, Carla. As you mentioned before, my name is Fiona Hinze. I'm our public policy director at Independent Living Resource Center. I was debating whether to weigh in on this because Sean actually encapsulated what I was going to say, which is I like the definition used, but on your slide with examples on it is mostly focused on what people I think would consider like higher tech solutions, mostly involving the computer. But I think that a lot of people, regardless of whether you have a disability or not, as Sean was referencing, would consider like items in the kitchen to be assistive technology, like a can opener with a grip. So I think we can think of assistive technology as a lot of things that are lower tech too.
Right.
That are kind of the less sexy things that are involved with a computer. So.
And they don't all have to be expensive. Some of these can be pretty basic items, as you pointed out. Let's see, Debbie Kaplan.
Well, I would like to start. First of all, I totally agree with what both Sean and Fiona have said. And just, I think there is also, though, a very close analogy between the built environment and what I like to call the electronic environment or digital environment. And this definition of assistive technology, I think, made more sense, say, 20 or 30 years ago, in the context of technology then, where most of the technology was not designed or even didn't anticipate that people with disabilities or seniors were going to use it. And so there was a need for an entire genre of technology that we call assistive technology to allow people, more and more people, to use the technology that existed then. But now that a lot of what used to be called assistive technology is now built into the technology that you can get, we used to say off the shelf, but out of the cloud, there isn't this distinction that is so clear all the time between regular technology or technology that is used by people without disabilities and the technology that people with disabilities or seniors use. And in fact, just like in the built environment, a lot of the things that get now built into regular technology that might have originated with the needs of people with disabilities ends up being wildly useful for everybody and gets used in ways that weren't even anticipated. And so the distinction between regular technology, so-called regular technology, and assistive technology is more blurry now. And I totally agree with Sean that if you see disability as just another way of being human, then all technology is assistive technology because it's designed to enable humans to make use of it.
Great. Excellent. And just to give a great example, so, I think a lot of us use voice to text technology constantly. I know that I do it when I'm driving. Hey, Siri, will you text? And my daughter actually at college has been writing papers using voice to text, and we've so things that we didn't anticipate are part of people's everyday experiences. All right, one more person on the panel. Let's take Tiffany.
Yes, I'm Tiffany from Department of Rehabilitation. I work with the deaf and hard of hearing. So some of the AT would be, hearing aids and the accessories that come with hearing aids. So they have a speaker that goes straight to their hearing aids or connects to their phone. But I think with everyone that's saying, it's all working well with what assistive technology is. And what we want to do is provide any assistive technology to make the person or individual feel comfortable and feel like they're part of the community with just those assistive technologies so they could participate in any meetings and such.
Let's take a look at accessible technology. Here's one from University of Washington. Researchers there say that technology that can be used by people with a wide range of abilities and disabilities, it incorporates the principles of universal design. Each user is able to interact with the technology in ways that work best for them. And so this is getting a little bit closer to what Debbie Kaplan from the mayor's office was talking about, when it's a little bit harder to figure out who the technology is for when it is widely used and wildly popular. Among our panelists, Debbie, why don't you jump in, and then we'll, what would you like to add to this?
So I think some people who are unfamiliar with the term might assume that there's only some technology. I mean, that only certain things fit this this term, but all technology can be accessible if it's designed well, just like all buildings could be accessible if they're designed to be accessible. There isn't any kind of technology that couldn't be accessible. It's a matter of whether standards for accessibility are followed when it's being designed and when it's being built, or maintained or updated. And so it's more like an adjective than a thing.
Okay, excellent. Other panelists want to weigh in on this? All
This
right.
is Sean. I'll weigh in. So maybe just kind of rephrasing a little bit of what we have here, or maybe explaining it a little bit of a different way. But I think the goal is that you want all users to have access to the same information when interacting with the product or service, and to be able to complete the desired task. So whatever the task or goal is associated with that product or service, you want them to have the information and be able to complete that task, but they don't necessarily have to complete it in the same way. So the way in which they get through that user flow or journey doesn't necessarily have to be the same, meaning that they don't have to use the same technologies or tools to get there, but it just has to be designed in a way that they can, access the information and get the same result. And that's where the universal design kind of comes in. And if users with disabilities and different technologies aren't considered in the design process, then they won't have access because it won't be considered, and there will be barriers and challenges.
Great. All right, Maricela from the library.
Hi, everybody. I think I kind of dovetail nicely with what Debbie and Sean both added, which is, the idea that anything can be accessible if designed properly, but it also is the idea of we need to be able to have users identify the barriers in order to be able to design things, if and be able to keep those barriers or challenges that might be come up in terms of when a person uses a technology, and then that informs informs the ability to be able to really have that from the beginning, because to make something accessible from the beginning is much easier than trying to correct for it afterwards, right? So it's like that, if we can get to that point, would be the ideal. But this also makes me think about how important user testing is, and user testing with different abilities to be able to test for that accessibility, because what may be accessible to me may not be accessible to the next person. And so I think that's one of those things that we're always having to keep in mind and consider.
Tiffany, you're next.
Yeah, so the other thing I always look at too, the barriers is really great thing to point out, but also the cost. A lot of these technologies and AT devices and assistive devices, sometimes they're so expensive that clients or individuals cannot pay. So hopefully we could find ways of low cost to no cost, so then we could be able to get the assistive device in the client's hands, so then they could utilize it in their daily life comfortably. So
great. All right, Fiona.
Yeah, I'll just sort of dovetail on this one, which is to say, and Sean can probably speak to this too with his experience with the corporate sector. I want to tag on to this idea of user testing and user testing at the beginning, from concept to design, from concept to a design of a final product, and making sure that people with disabilities are consulted in the design of products. I know that a lot of big corporations and tech companies now have, accessibility sort of divisions in their, within their companies, but I think really getting the input of the disability community at all phases of the technology's development, and I don't think that always necessarily happens, and I think that that's a gap in our sort of technology advocacy. The other thing I would say sort of dovetails nicely into what Tiffany just said, which is I think accessibility, if you take another definition, also means it's available and sort of its ubiquitousness in our society, and making sure that the technology is sort of distributed in an equitable way, and making sure that we can all get our devices in the hands of people that need them. I know, and Debbie, you mentioned earlier that a lot of the assistive technology that we use is now off the shelf, which is also, great for the equity and people. It's done a lot for the ubiquitousness of this assistive technology, as you were saying, Carla, with your daughter, and using voice recognition for her daily tasks. So, yeah.
Great. All right, let's turn to you, Debbie, for one last quick comment on this, and then we're going to turn it over to some further questions.
One wrinkle in all of this is that with more and more of what used to be thought of, or used to be called assistive technology, getting built into the devices that, as everybody buys them, one of the problems that has happened with respect to equitable accessibility, as Fiona was just talking about it, is that people whose needs are not met by the mainstream assistive technology that is built into operating systems or devices end up really getting sort of stranded with the cost of the assistive technology that they need to get that isn't already there, more and more expensive because the market is so small, and or maybe the company that used to make something that met their needs even went out of business. And so there's issues of equity have to do with whether the particular product you need is available at a cost you can afford and even exists.
Great. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and each of you, we get to do a bit of a profile. Since there are 5, and we still want to get to more questions, take 2 to 3 minutes. And the question I'm asking is, what role do ATs, meaning either accessible or assistive technologies, play in your organization? Sean, why don't we start out with you, and
Sure.
then we'll move to Maricela after that.
Sure, sounds great. As I mentioned, my name is Sean Dougherty. I work at Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired in San Francisco on the Access Technology team. My specific role is focused on managing our corporate partnerships and relationships, which is usually tied to accessibility consulting work in a few different areas. But our Access Technology team is kind of divided into 2 parts. One part does a lot of our direct service work, which is individual training and group training with blind and low vision individuals in the SF Bay Area and throughout California. And we train on different devices and technologies and training that's tied to vocational types of work. So within my specific team, AT is really at the center of everything that we do. That's our specific team. Within Lighthouse as a whole, there's a lot of different programs that we offer. So we offer O&M training, independent living skills, other support services. And in some cases, AT is a part of those services. And in some cases, it's not necessarily at the center. So we view AT as a critical piece, but it's not the only piece. I think we need a lot of human to human support and other services that tie into that.
Great, thank you. I know that, do you still have the sort of store at Lighthouse where you can
Yes.
try things and folks can help you out and figure out what you need?
Yes, we have a store called Adaptations, and it is based at 1155 Market Street at our headquarters in San Francisco. And they also have a website as well. And yeah, they sell a lot of physical products, canes, different types of devices and tools. So it ranges from physical technology to software and everything in between, from low tech to high tech. So they carry thousands of different products.
Excellent, excellent. If you can put that info in the chat, that would be great because I didn't realize the website piece of it.
Yes, yeah, that kind of took off during COVID, and so now we kind of offer both. They can do in-person appointment, and you can also buy through the website. So I can drop it in the chat.
Great. I put a note in the chat, but make sure folks who are participating in this meeting, put your questions and comments in the chat, and we will, work around and make sure that you're heard at some point. Maricela from SFPL, thank you for joining us.
Hey everybody. So I am really happy to be part of this panel, and to just introduce myself again, my name is Maricela Leon-Barrera, and I am the Access Services Manager here at the San Francisco Public Library. I help support the Talking Books and Braille Center and the Deaf Services Center here, in addition to being the 88 coordinator for programs and services. So if you or any of your clients or people that you know might have an accessibility concern or request, they can get in touch with me and I can help them out, especially if they have a question about the library and what we can provide. And I will be sharing my email in order to be able to, you can share that out. But I did prepare a couple of slides just for you to kind of get a sense of what it is that we provide. And I love that Fiona brought up something about distribution of AT, right? And how does it get disseminated and how do people get access to it? And so that's something that the library is really striving to do, and always learning more of what we can do more of, and that can apply for library setting for use for patrons. And so I invite you all that if you, I would love to collaborate with you in ideas in terms of what might be, what might you want to see at the library, what might your clients might want to see at the library, so that we can kind of collaborate together to see what we can provide. Our goal is really to be able to provide, access to the online resources, catalog, research databases, and the internet. That is one of those things that a lot of people know the library for, is that it's free internet access. What they might not know is that we also have ways to be able to give people access to print materials if they're unable to see the print. And we also have access to low tech, that some of which was already mentioned, materials. So here on this slide, I have included two images, one of our assistive technology circle that kind of denotes where our AT rooms are, which is where you'll find some of the technology that we have at the library. And the other image here is a accessibility toolkit, which is actually available at every branch location that has some of that low tech AT available for patrons. And they're able to request those for use. The next slide is AT rooms and AT laptops, which is something that we provide access to. We have AT rooms at the main library that help patrons access technology. These include scanners, these include the computers, large keyboards, printers, all available for those people who are identified AT users. To become an identified AT user is an application and often a conversation as to what kind of AT you need in order to be able to make computers and computing accessible. We also have AT laptops at every location. As you all know, or may have visited our libraries, our branch libraries are considerably smaller. And so that's why we have AT laptops available at those locations, which also play well with the large keyboards and easier to navigate outside mouses. And they include software, which oftentimes can be inaccessible due to cost. And something that Debbie mentioned is just the price on some of these software makes it inaccessible. So, and then, we're always kind of making sure that these softwares are still available. So we have things like JAWS and Open Book, Read and Write, things that read text from the screen and screen readers that, people can hear it if they are low vision or blind, but also having just the regular suite of what we provide at every computer, which is the internet access and Microsoft. But some of the things that people may not know is about the low-tech AT available at the library. Should they want to try some of these things out, there are magnifiers and pencil grips, personal amplifiers. We have book holders for people who may have trouble holding a book. There's book holders available at every location, including the main, large print rulers, currency readers for people who cannot see the bills. So here on this slide, I have images of magnifiers and pencil grips and large print keyboards so that, those are things that are low-tech AT, but just as useful and helpful for people who need to access, print material. And lastly, I just want to end with other things that people may not think of in terms of technology, in terms of assistive technology, which is really can touch any part of any person's life that makes it easier for them to navigate life. We have video phones for public use at the Deaf Services Center, which are very popular. Today I had one person on it and the other person waiting. And there is ways to connect with us also via video phone and staff who are ASL proficient and can answer that. And then other things in the Talking Books and Braille Center, which we are the main library is right across the street from Lighthouse. So we're very close neighbors.
We're neighbors, yep.
Yes, so Sean knows about the Talking Books and Braille Center, which is currently right now under renovation, but still we're providing service. So people who want talking book players or access to the reading machines, the magnifiers, the brilliant, embosser access, or help with getting things in Braille. We have audio described DVDs and VHS in VHS format. The images on this slide are what an NLS talking book player looks like, and some of those the magnifier that's available on some of the floors here at the main. And so just know that we're here. We're happy to help support people who may want access to AT, try something out. They may not know is available for free use at their library, at your library.
Fiona, let's jump to you.
All right. Thank you again for again, Fiona Hinze, Public Policy Director at Independent Living Resource Center. One thing I will say from the get-go is that I'm not our AT educator. Maricela, who's actually here, is our AT educator. I'm not sure if she's prepared to answer questions this evening, but if you have questions just specific to our day-to-day AT program, she is your go-to person on that. I will speak generally. So as an independent women's center, there are 28 of independent women's centers across the state, and assistive technology is a core service of all 28 independent women's centers, which means that every independent women's center has to have some form of an AT program. They differ, all of them differ slightly. And I would say for us, obviously our mission is, as an independent women's center, for folks to lead as independent of a life as possible. And as we sort of touched on earlier, assistive technology or technology in general is a key thing that helps folks to be able to do that. So we like to facilitate, we facilitate independence through that. Also, independent living centers are the first stop for people on their sort of disability journey. So Maricela likes to help people figure out what AT is best for them. So we help facilitate in that conversation. Also, when people are going into new living situations, they may need AT. So that sort of like working through what people need is something that we've seen. And especially during COVID, when most of our services, well, all of our services went virtual. One of our other core missions is to reduce isolation. And so we really saw that technology became critical as most in-person services shut down. I know I'm preaching to the choir here on this call. Most folks know quite a bit about the digital divide. So as the world goes even more technological and it becomes even more of a necessity, I think a lot of technology that was previously viewed as kind of a luxury is now being viewed more of as a necessity. And I think that that's something as policymakers in the city, and we'll get into this in a few questions. As policymakers in the city, we need to start to pivot towards technology being more of a necessity rather than a luxury that people need to really succeed in their lives. So
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move to Tiffany and then Debbie, and then we're going to jump to another round of questions. So Tiffany, welcome.
From Department of Rehabilitation. I work from the San Bruno branch, and we help out with various disabilities, of course, and we help out with providing accommodations for people that are in school or in their jobs. So a lot of times we try to connect the clients who are in school with the Disability Resource Center and try to make sure they have accommodations, as sometimes, like we all know, students work differently with different assistive technologies. So some may need note takers, some need additional time on tests, some people need interpreters in the classroom. So that's one aspect. I work with the Deaf and Hard of Hearing in San Mateo County. And so I help out the individuals that have hearing aids or cochlear implants. The hearing aids, we look at how old they are, what model they need, if they need an accessory that goes with the hearing aids, such as an FM system, we try to get that going for them. And then also we look at telephones when they're in the job. A lot of jobs don't know what those assistive technologies are in the workplace. You'll be surprised. I have had consents written up so I could collaborate with the supervisors to make sure the accommodations are being met. So if you guys do have people that are in wanting to go to school, get a degree for a job that's required a degree, then refer them to San Francisco, San Bruno, Menlo, and Foster City. And Novato. And so that's all I could give you for right now, but do not hesitate to email me if you wish to receive any answers to any of your questions. So, yeah.
Thank you, Tiffany. And I do have your resource, and I'll try to put it in the chat shortly. Debbie, we're going to close out this section with you, and then we're going to turn to policy issues. So anything that you'd like to add in terms of the mayor's office and issues on assistive or accessible tech?
A lot of what the mayor's office on disability has been doing falls under the accessible technology side of things. we are very involved in implementation of citywide policy and requirements regarding accessibility of websites and web content, and are right now helping to get some citywide contracts for web accessibility, auditing, testing, and remediation services for different departments. Because in San Francisco, I don't know how many of you have experience with San Francisco government, but departments and offices are extremely independent, have their own websites, their own policies about their websites. And so what we do is sort of like herding cats. We also have, many departments have switched over to a new platform that's sf.gov from our older websites. And sf.gov is all templated and it's designed so that the websites that are on sf.gov are accessible. But making sure the content that is linked to is accessible is a big challenge. The other area that we've been very involved in for the last couple of years is providing guidance to all the different departments around how to make sure that virtual meetings and events are accessible. And for those of you who have really taken the challenge seriously to make sure that your virtual or hybrid meetings are accessible, you know that's not simple. And the devil is in the details. And right now we're working on how to make sure that all public comment, if people have disabilities, that there is an ability to make public comment to meetings, even in person, virtually, and making sure that all of that will be accessible. And so we have been working on the accessibility side of things.
Thank you. Now we're gonna make sure you're putting notes in the chat box. But now we're gonna do a bit of a lightning round and a little bit of like sort of assets in that San Francisco Bay Area has when it comes to accessible and assistive technologies, as well as gaps and barriers. So the first thing I want everybody to weigh in on is, what do you think San Francisco's, at least from your point of view, strengths are when it comes to accessible or assistive technology? And since you're still on, Debbie, why don't you start us off? Can you think of one one strength that the city has when it comes to this? A lot of parts of the country don't have very much at all.
Well, one strength that I would like to see us make better use of is the very large tech companies that are based in San Francisco that have very, very strong accessibility offices that have built up over the years. In particular, Facebook, Salesforce, and there are other companies that have some of the top experts in the corporate world in accessibility. We all live in separate worlds, and I don't think that that's necessarily because everybody wants it that way. But I think there needs to be leadership to try to work around and find projects and ways to collaborate and take advantage of all the resources that we share in terms of mutual interest.
Excellent. Thank you. That's a huge point. And I think that's something that would require a separate meeting and many separate meetings to make sure something like that happens. Fiona, why don't you jump in?
I will go next. I think that one strength that we have, and it can also partially be a weakness, is that we have so many dedicated nonprofit organizations that provide some sort of AT services. A lot of you are on the call. I think that we have really a lot of folks here who provide AT services. And I think that to do better, I think we could get maybe do better getting the word out about how to for folks to access them, and maybe find ways for us to collaborate more, outside of something like this group, how to collaborate more as a sector of technology providers. But I do think it's a huge asset in San Francisco of the dedicated service providers that we have providing AT services.
Excellent. All right. Other panelists want to weigh in on this. Assets, strengths in San Francisco.
This is Sean. Happy to weigh in. Yeah, I think we have quite a few strengths. I mean, I know there's a lot of problems, but I think we have a lot going for us. I think we have a really strong disability community. I think a lot of the greatest advancements within accessibility and access have come out of the Bay Area, everything from the creation of the ADA to many advancements in assistive technology and accessibility features. And I think we have a very active disability community. I know, at least where I work, I work with a lot of blind and low vision individuals. I'm also low vision myself, and I'm always just amazed on what people are doing and how active they are in the community, whether it's activities or engagement. So I think we have a really strong presence as a community, even though I know there's underserved populations and there's still a lot of work to be done. But I think, as was also mentioned, our close proximity to Silicon Valley and the big tech companies does pose a unique opportunity. I think, at least in the area where I sit, we are conducting a lot of user research with a lot of those big techs that are interested in getting feedback and input from the community, and have built out a pretty good accessibility stance and team. So I think we're uniquely positioned there that if we can engage and form those right partnerships, we can help shape technology that touches millions and millions of people all over the world.
Great. Maricela or Tiffany, or both of you, would you like to weigh in on this in terms of strengths or assets?
Sure, I can weigh in. I think one of the things that we are in San Francisco is that we're a pretty well resourced city, in the sense of that we have the resources. We just need to make sure that we're targeting them where they need to be. And I think that's something that a strength that I see here in this meeting is that being able to kind of learn from each other as to what is possible in order to be able to serve the needs of the city and the community that needs it. And also the larger, we know that a lot of us agencies here, we serve the needs of our city, but we also serve some of the needs of the larger disability community in the Bay Area. And so just being able to have those, be able to work together to be able to know where do we need to meet this need? Where is the need and what is it like, and what can we do together in order to make it happen? So
great, thank you. Anything you'd like to add, Tiffany?
Yeah, I think from being a counselor in San Mateo, I could see a big difference between San Francisco and San Mateo. There still needs a lot of work done in San Mateo. I think just spreading it, for example, for hearing aid services, I have 2 vendors in San Francisco and only 1 in San Mateo County. And I think it's based off of how the vendors want to be paid. Like, they like to be paid up front instead of after. So it's kind of, I think my job is cut out for me, whereas I need to collaborate with some of these vendors and, have a talk with them and be like, let's provide more services. You still get these patients. Well, I have patients here that are involved with Department of Rehabilitation. Let's make this work. What would you like to do? And just kind of collaborate a lot more in the community of San Mateo. And I think it could all balance out. So, yes.
Thank you. All right, now you know where we're headed, right, folks? Gaps. What are, and I know that each of you could come up with a long list limit it to one or two of the biggest gaps that you see today, at least from your perspective within your organization. Sean, do you want to start us off on that one?
Yeah, sure. I think, and a couple of these have been mentioned, but I just think that we see a lot of technologies that are still really expensive. So there have been a lot of built-in features that are available to a lot of the disability community within mainstream technologies, but those don't serve everyone. And so those outside technologies, whether it's a specific screen reading device or some type of software that isn't built in, that's very expensive. So that's kind of a barrier that we see. We also see a bit of a barrier around access to resources, particularly for individuals that English is their second language, or don't speak English. Like we have some trouble supporting those individuals and see a bit of a gap. Like basically we try to find recruit staff members that are AT trainers that can serve those populations, but because it is a very specialized field, sometimes we have trouble finding people that are highly qualified that are bilingual in those areas, since we have such a diverse community. So that's a little bit of a barrier for us, at least on the training side that I see in SF.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, the language and a lot of these things that we're talking about today are intersectional. They cross a lot of things, but yeah, language is something that we are all of our organizations are really coming up against and trying to figure out how to make sure that we're reaching those who aren't being reached. Fiona, why don't you jump in?
I wanted to jump in after Sean because my deficit or whatever we're calling them, my weakness is, I think in recent years we've had a lot of devices and money for devices specifically that have come down the pike, but the thing that I see is a lack of staff to train the folks in literacy and how to use the device, and that's not a knock on any organization that does the training at all. It just to say that we need more of the people, we need more trainers, because the technology is becoming so ubiquitous. We need more capacity within our organizations to train the folks, right? I do a lot of I did the Keep Us Connected campaign last year, which some of you are familiar with. And something I would always tell the supervisors is a device in someone's hands is no good if they don't know how to use it. So really investing in increasing our capacity for tech trainers is, I think, where we need to focus our next sort of push of advocacy going forward.
That's a really good point. Just to weigh in there for one quick second, that I agree that the cost factor for those devices is one issue, but even if the devices are there, without that training, there is a high degree of abandonment, and those devices just sit on the shelf, so they're just not utilized, and that's not effective, obviously. So I completely agree.
All right. Other panelists want to just jump in there in terms of biggest gaps that you see.
I'm Tiffany. One of the biggest gaps is connection with the clients. Some of them during the pandemic, the devices couldn't even be utilized in the home. For an example, one of my deaf clients needed purple communication where they could set up a TV to make calls out. And one of their services was that they were going to attend the home, but because of COVID, they couldn't. And that was one of the biggest barriers. And so my client would physically come in and I'm like, can we do this? Like, we're trying to figure out everything. And it's still a struggle just to get a phone in someone's house. And that was a safety matter in my mind. So, yeah. So that's one of the biggest things that bothers me in the gaps.
Debby or Maricela?
I was going to jump in and just say, this is Maricela. I think one of the gaps is that something that I was mentioned earlier as a barrier, which is we don't know, like, for example, for me, I can say like, what do we need to know in order to make informed decisions in terms of what is needed? And so, Andrew, I know you asked that in the chat. And I think I'm glad that Debbie's going next, because I think in some ways, Debby kind of answers that question of like, what do we need to do in order to be able to work together, to be able to find out to work collaboratively as to what it is that we need. Where do our attention need to focus in order to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community? So I'm gonna pass it over to Debby because I know she's next, but I love that. If you haven't had a chance to read Debbie's idea in the chat, look for that.
I'll just I mean, this is one of the most interesting. I say this not because I'm a panelist, but this is a great session, and I perceive a high level of involvement, and I'm looking just at the diversity of people who are here, all the different organizations that are represented, and different kinds of roles that people play, and it's very exciting. And I think there's a lot to be gained by coming together. We were just talking about CSUN. I've been to many CSUN conferences, and one of the things I've personally been very active in this area for decades, both nationally and in California and locally, and there's just a great spirit, I think, and love of what we do amongst all the different people who work on technology access. And it's always super enlightening and energizing when we come together, because we all have little pieces of the whole, and there's huge needs to figure out, I think, locally, how we can better collaborate and coordinate and target and become more effective, and establish more I can't think of the word, but just be able to do more, because you can always do more together. And we're all living in our own little worlds. I think also there's a lot of new people coming into this area all the time, people who are new to web accessibility and want to make their websites accessible. And I get overwhelmed now at the size of the field, the choices that are available, what training, what vendor, who do they use, what articles should they read. It can be very overwhelming. And I think there's a huge need for curation, I guess, is the word, for those who have been in the field for a while, to have a way to mentor and organize information and share what we know with all the newcomers, in order to help people not reinvent the wheel, and understand what are potential pitfalls, as well as what are great unrecognized resources. So I just see a really big need to come together and be focused on this issue in an ongoing way,